All right. Welcome everybody to week 3 of the Age of Discovery class. I'm really excited to talk about the topics that are on tap for today. Um, this is all things that I think a lot of this stuff is new to us. And so I'm going to give you a little bit more of a background. I think the author does a great job of providing a background. I'm going to go a little bit slower and talk about some of the names, some of the people, a little bit of the timeline, and then I want to show and I guess share with you one of my favorite monuments here in Portugal that is going to be sort of a measuring stick of who have we talked about so far. It's this really cool monument to the discoverers in part of the waterfront part of, well, one of the waterfront parts of the city of Lisbon. And my favorite place to go when I have people who are visiting and anyway, so I'll slow things down a little bit. Today's class, we'll have a discussion for sure, but for a big part of it, I'm going to speak more than I normally do, just to give a little bit of a background on some of the kings, talk about what's going on, what we've already talked about, summarize some of the things we're talking about this week or learned about this week, and then give a quick summary of what we're going to talk about next week, and sort of put this all together because starting next week or the week beyond, we're going to start getting into the actual voyage of Vasco da Gama, the main feature or focus of the book we're reading. And so all of this has sort of been preparing us for what's about to happen, this amazing discovery and the route that they uncover to get to India coming up. So that's what we're going to do today. I'll share my screen and maybe I'll share my screen. There's the button. And modify my stuff so I can still see you. All right, is my screen sharing? Can you guys see the cover page for the slides? Excellent. Great. In fact, this here, the monument I was just talking about, is this one here. And I'll show you more pictures of it. It's just in front of this picture here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that too. This is a monastery that was built with all of the money they get from the spice trade after Vasco da Gama finds India. They build a gigantic monastery where monks pray 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the sailors and explorers and discoverers that are going out to advance Christianity and advance Portugal. Um, and that's right next to all this stuff too. Pretty cool. All right. So for today's agenda, we'll do a few more introductions. And so if you have not introduced yourself in class yet today, remember name, age, and we'll go over this again. Name, age, where you're from, where you're living, if that's different from where you're from, your favorite ice cream, and hobbies. Just so as we get to know each other, when someone raises their hand and gives a comment, oh, I remember that guy. He's the one that does this or that. So we can know each other a little better and maybe feel more comfortable speaking up. I said my discussion question. It's not a question, just my discussion today, going into a little bit more detail of some of the people and I'll post that stuff on the class thing later because we'll want to refer back to some of these things later also. We'll talk about a few of our favorite things. We'll talk about our research. So next week, we'll continue reading The Last Crusade. Oh, I can't unblur it. It's not recognizing my book as a face, but we'll read chapters 5 and 6, and we'll have some more supplemental content this week. Last week, I said we would have supplemental content on Bartolomeo Diaz. We did not last week. This week we will. We'll finally get to his portion or his story within the book. We'll talk about not an explorer per se, as far as going on a ship, but Peru de Covilla is someone who was given a really tall task to go and find Prester John, to go and find a route to India, and to go and find the south end of Africa. So he had this almost impossible task that he was given, and he was to go by land to find all of these things. And so we'll learn more about his role in the Age of Discovery and how that helped Portugal feel more confident about sending someone like Bartolomeo Diaz down around the bottom of Africa, and then Vasco da Gama later. Two really important people in this whole process, in as far as like building up to, we're finally going to do it. We're going to make that trip around the south end of Africa. And then in 2 weeks, we'll have a much lighter week of reading. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to focus on more of the innovations that occurred. So the book so far from chapters 1 through chapters 6 have covered hundreds of years and a lot of discoveries. If you remember, the Portuguese and everyone was used to navigating by the stars and based on things that were in the northern hemisphere. Once you cross the equator, the sky changes and you can't see some of the stars, like the North Star, to guide your way. And so they had to learn new ways of navigating, new ways of knowing where they were, and it threw them off a little bit. And so we'll learn some of the inventions that they created in order to understand the stars, to navigate, to just know their global position. They didn't have GPS back then. And so they had to come up with things to understand where they were when they were in the middle of the ocean and didn't know what direction was what. Well, they did know because they had these instruments. We'll talk about caravels, which were the ships they were using at the beginning of the Age of Discovery. We'll talk about carracks, which is a step up from the caravel that allowed them to travel further, carry more supplies. And anyway, we'll just talk about those inventions, innovations, things that occurred during the book so far up to this point, and innovations that will help the next group of people as they move forward. That's in 2 weeks. So next week we'll read chapters 5 and 6. In 2 weeks, we're going to go into more of the innovations and inventions. And then the following week, we're going to jump back into the book and find out who this guy named Vasco da Gama is and why I keep saying his name. And we'll learn more about him and his story. So let's see. Where'd my mouse go? All right. Announcements, questionnaire. If you haven't done it yet, please do. I think there's still one or two that haven't. I will send you a message tomorrow, probably, if I don't hear from you, if you've not already filled it out. Remember, office hours. If you have any questions, want to discuss anything, or are confused by something, please either send me a message, or on Wednesday evenings, you can come to these office hours. I use the Zoom link for this class. So you can just log in. I'm there working on my patent lawyer stuff that I do. And if I see someone pop up on Zoom, then I'll talk to you for a little bit. That's what we'll do for the office hours. That's just a reminder, it's on Wednesdays. All right, introductions. If your name is next to one of these bullet points, it means I don't have record of you having introduced yourself. It could be wrong. I have been wrong before. So if you see your name and you have introduced yourself in this class, you can just send me a message and let me know. I'll take you off. But if your name is there, please raise your hand, introduce yourself to us, and let us know your name, your age, where you're from, where you live, your favorite flavor of ice cream, your favorite hobby or hobbies. And so I'll stop sharing my screen and I will let a few of you introduce yourself from there. All right. Anybody willing to be the first for today? Excellent. Braden, go ahead.
I'm Braden. I'm 15 and I'm from Queen Creek, Arizona. My favorite flavor of ice cream probably would be, let's see, probably chocolate chip cookie dough or mint mint chip. So, some hobbies. I like Legos and I play D&D a lot and I like to read. So, yeah.
Excellent. Do you have a favorite type of thing to build with Legos?
I collect the Lego Speed Champion sets, so I have a bunch of those. And so
Very
yeah,
cool.
I like those. They're just little cars, but they're modeled after like actual cars. So yeah.
Cool. That's very cool. And your favorite book or book series, if you have one.
That's kind of hard to say. Uh, right now, I am reading the Stormlight Archive. I'm just finishing it up by Brandon Sanderson. I really like Brandon Sanderson, but also I really like Harry Potter, so.
Awesome. Awesome. Great choices. And there are a few pretty vigorous head nods by some of your classmates on those book choices. So I think that you're not the only one in here that likes those books. Very cool. Welcome to the class, Braden. I had a message about repeating the office hours. So office hours are on Wednesday nights, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Mountain. If you're in Portugal, that's 11 p.m. If you're in Bulgaria, like David, then that's 1 a.m. So, David, I expect to see you every week. Just kidding. And so Wednesday nights and the Zoom link is the same link for this class. You can just go to any class period, anything, and just click on the Zoom link there. It'll take you to the Zoom link where I'll be sitting, waiting for someone to come and ask any questions or talk about this stuff. Great, good question. And thank you, Braden. Anybody else from the list? Or should I call on you? I couldn't remember if the Checkits boys introduced themselves. If they haven't, Oliver and James, all you guys are on the clock.
Yeah, we haven't introduced ourselves yet. But I'm Oliver. I'm 16, currently living in Florida, but we're both from San Antonio, Texas. My favorite ice cream flavor is Texas Starry Night, and it's like a pretty much chocolate cookie dough, but with chocolate ice cream. And as far as hobbies go, I like to do parkour and triathlons.
Nice. With the parkour, do you like to do things like over huge drop? Like, what's your favorite kind of parkour, I guess? How crazy do you get?
Pretty much just the climbing and flipping off ledges, platforms, and stuff like that.
Nice. Do you
Yeah.
do roof to roof kind of stuff or?
Uh, when my parents allow it. Yeah.
Awesome. Which, if you were at our house, that would mean never.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Very cool. And then is the Texas Starry Night, is that like Bluebell or is that, it must be local to
No,
Texas,
it's
right?
yeah, there's a store in Texas that's kind of like uh only in the San Antonio area called HEB, and it's their ice cream brand.
Oh, nice. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. These introductions always make me hungry for ice cream. Everybody's flavors sound so good. I like ice cream. Very cool. Thanks, Oliver.
Yeah.
Welcome. All right, James.
I'm James. Oliver already said where we're from. I'm 15. My favorite ice cream flavor is homemade mint chocolate, and I like doing sports.
Excellent. Do you have a favorite sport?
Um, I like running and swimming.
Nice. So do you do triathlons too? Just
Yes, we
got
have
to
one
throw
this
in a bike
Saturday.
to that running and
Yep.
swim. Awesome. We have a pretty good swim team in this class, I think. Just I think I know of at least four who swim competitively, so pretty cool. Maybe five even. Maybe we'll have to have a virtual swim meet for the age of discovery. Probably not. But I mean, you guys would all be safe on a boat, right? Oh, one interesting thing about the age of discovery that I learned, um, not a lot of these people could swim very well, even though they're out on boats all the time and they're navigating and stuff. Not great swimmers. So I think that would be one advantage that some of you would have over some of them back in the day. Cool. Thanks, James, and welcome to the class. All right, got time for one more. Anybody on the list? Addie, Barney, I'll call on you and you'll be the last one for today.
Okay. My name's Addie. I'm 16. I'm from a small town in southern Utah. It's called Hatch. Most of you probably won't know where that is. My favorite flavor ice cream is probably Rocky Road, and I like to go hunting, and I like to cook and play the piano.
Excellent. Excellent. Do you have a favorite dish to cook?
I like to make sourdough bread.
Ooh, nice. So I guess you must have your own starter. You feed it, keep it
Yeah,
alive. Is
I'm
that,
actually making 40 loaves this Saturday to sell.
you're making how many?
40?
40 loaves of bread?
Yep.
Holy cow. How long does that take? And like how much? So I don't know a whole lot about sourdough bread, but I know that it's pretty delicate in how like you feed it, let it grow so that it can make good bread. How long does it take to cook 40 loaves?
Probably over half a day.
Wow. That's incredible. I would have expected even longer. That's a lot of bread. Cool. I would like to be your neighbor and eat sourdough bread right out of the oven. That's awesome. Welcome to the class. Thank
Thank you.
you. All right. That'll be it for introductions today. Let me go back to sharing my screen. Thank you for those who introduced yourself. For the rest of you who didn't, I think a few of them are not here. In fact, I think everyone who is still left on our list is not here. So I share the right screen. Yeah, there we go. All right. My screen sharing. Perfect. All right. So we'll have a few more introductions next week, hopefully. Um, and then that will be it for this class. All right. So for my discussion, I wanted to give a quick background to kind of sum up what we have read, what we will, and what we will read in the next week, just to sort of start setting the stage for what's coming up and how all of the stuff that we've read so far matters or why it matters. So last week we read and learned about Marco Polo and his writings, right? So the people back in this time period were first introduced to what was available to them if they could get to India, if they could get to Asia, get to China, all of the silks and the spices and the gold and the riches and the jade and the diamonds and all sorts of stuff that was really fascinating and the cool animals that were really exotic to them at the time. Um, all of those things they learned about through Marco Polo. This week, we learned a little bit about Prester John, who is this mythical or maybe not mythical. I think a lot of the story around who Prester John was mythical. They find out later that there may have been an actual person who was their idea of Prester John, but absolutely not anything like what all of these myths and stories and fables had built him up to be. Um, so he's this Christian king that over the course of time moved all over the place somehow, but no one called it out, right? There was Prester John began in Asia, and then there were stories of Prester John somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula, and then eventually, and probably the most widely held version of Prester John was that he was in Africa somewhere. Um, at the end of the day, they find him in Ethiopia. This person who they sort of attribute all of these mythical things to, or at least a descendant of him, and not as powerful, doesn't have all the gold, doesn't have the armies, um, but they do find someone that they, I guess, attribute uh, Prester John to. Anyway, so we learn a little bit about him, but the fact that someone like Prester John supposedly exists ignites the imagination of the Portuguese people, especially the rulers, especially those who are wanting to advance Christianity, to push Christianity out to all the world, to get rid of Islam, and to win back Jerusalem. And so, one of the things that they feel like could happen is if the Portuguese join forces with the Italians and the Spanish, they could get all of their armies and they could get the magnificent armies of Prester John, which supposedly were huge, and together they could come from both directions, converge on Jerusalem, and take back that part of the world for Christianity. And so they had all of these things that were sort of building up, right? You have the Marco Polo stories from Asia of all of the things that are available there. They're buying spices, they're um, getting all of these silks, but at really high prices. So only the royalty, only the really rich people can have these staples that, I mean, they're staples now of like sugar all the time. I guess comes later, but the pepper, the cinnamon, all of those spices that we like, um, that we have on our tables, that we can go to the grocery store and buy black pepper for like a bottle of it for less than $1, right? People back then were paying so much money to have some of this black pepper to spice their foods. Um, and so they have all of this knowledge. They're sending people out to find Prester John, and they're not finding him. They are finding some things that are promising that will help them um, gain more confidence to jump into the age of discovery even further. And then one more thing happens that we'll learn about this next week. A city called Constantinople, which is in Turkey, it's now Istanbul, was Christian. They had probably the most magnificent Christian church in Constantinople. And the Ottoman Empire comes in, takes over Turkey. So the Ottomans were Islamic. They take over Turkey, kick the Christians out, and suddenly they close down all of the trade routes that are connecting Europe to Asia. And so now, not only do they want to take Christianity to the world and to take back Jerusalem and get rid of all of the other heathen religions, um, now their beloved spices are getting more expensive because they can't just take them from Asia overland to the Mediterranean and then ship them to different places in Europe. So spices are now getting super expensive. And so with all of this, they realize we've got to find another way to get to Asia. We need to find Prester John. We need to do all these things. And so they start taking more risks. They start doing more things to find Prester John. So as I was saying that, let's see, the Peru de Covilla, he is sent out on a mission. And so here we have Portugal, and he goes over to the Mediterranean Sea and starts going down through Africa, trying to find the way, trying to find a route around the south end of Africa, find Prester John. Through all of their discoveries so far, with Henry the Navigator pushing more discoveries, we have they go past Cape Bojador, as we talked about last week, and on their way back. So if when we get into the ocean, there are certain trade winds and things that we'll learn a little bit more about once we get to in 2 weeks when we talk about innovations and inventions and things they discovered. But you have these different trade winds that are blowing in different directions. And so when they got away from the African coast, started making their way back to Portugal, they found Madeira, which is an island out in the Atlantic Ocean that they call the Hawaii of Europe. Super beautiful. And that's where most of my dairy products come from. Really green, really rich place, like food rich place where they have a lot of cows and the dairy is fantastic. The milk's really good. The butter is really good too. I like it a lot. And so then when they get further down Cape Bojador, they start drifting out further and then they come back and they run into the Azores, which is another set of islands that still belong to Portugal today. And so this is what we have so far in the book that we've read. We've made it a little bit past down here towards Cape Verde, and this is what their view was, what they knew of, what their own people had seen. And so starting next week, we're going to start going a little bit further down this African coast. We're starting to get more motivated to find a new route because I gotta have my peppers and cinnamon to spice all my foods. Salt is just boring, right? And it's now too expensive for me, so I gotta find a new way to get that curry in my kitchen on my plate. Um, I love I love those foods. All right, so when we're reading through the book, it's so easy, especially when they're talking about kings that we've never heard of. So, who is King John? Who is Edward? Who is Alfonso? Alfonso, not Alfonso, sorry. Who's John the Second? And so I wanted to provide this, and I'll put this also in our Mighty Networks app, so you can refer back to this slide or this picture, and I'll add a few more kings too, so that once you come across the new king name, you can sort of figure out where they are in the I can't speak today. Chronology. Whew, it's a hard word, I guess. The chronology of the Portuguese kings. And so what we have already read about John the First. He is the one that we were reading about. He had 7 sons, and his third son was Henry the Navigator. Um, he stabilized Portugal. His reign laid the groundwork for their maritime expansion. If you remember, he went with his sons to Ceuta and took over that port city in Morocco and helped his sons grow up in that way, I guess. Edward, his oldest son, is the one who takes over. He continues to support Henry the Navigator, gives Henry the Navigator the African coast and says, it's yours, you're in charge of it. You can collect a tax from anything that comes from there. He gives that sort of reign or jurisdiction over Henry the Navigator. Under his reign, that's when Gilles Ienish goes past Cape Bojador, and they start pushing past limits of earlier sailors. Afonso V is who we will be talking about the most today, or what we read about most today. And he was Edward's son. So Henry the Navigator was Afonso's uncle. And Afonso is called the African. That's the nickname because he was doing so much exploration for Portuguese, or supporting so much exploration for Portuguese. And he's also the one that unfortunately started the slave trade, which we'll get into a little bit later when we're talking about the book in our own discussion. But Afonso is replaced by John II, and John II is called the perfect prince. So a lot of the bad things that Afonso started doing, at least bad in my eyes, and I think a lot of the Portuguese were kind of not super excited about it, as we read in the book. They're sad about and maybe upset. He starts cleaning that up. He has more discipline in where he's sending navigators. He has a bigger vision of what can happen and what they can do if they really push the limits a little bit more. And he starts pushing southward in Africa. He is the one that sends out Covilha, sends out Bartolomeu Dias, that we'll read about next week. And so starting in the chapters that we're going to read this coming week, we'll see John II take over and start doing more. And you'll see, I think, we just have this whole span of time where Afonso is the king, and he was doing things that were nice for Portugal. But once John II takes over, I think the age of discovery truly takes off in Portugal. And they start really trying to push the limits, really trying to find other things. And it coincides also with what's going on in Constantinople, trying to find Prester John, and wanting to have better access to all of the wonderful things that were in Asia that were so hard to get in Europe. So I'll post this again. I'll add a few more kings to it because the story doesn't end with John II. It goes on past him for a few more kings within the Age of Discovery. And so, any questions about the kings? Any comments about the kings? Any laws? I'm just kidding. The one time that political discourse would be okay in our class is talking about these kings. But I don't know any of their politics, so it doesn't matter, except for what they were doing to advance the age of discovery and what was going on with the slave trade, which I disagree with. But all right, so next, I want to show you a couple of things and then talk about them real quick. Maybe it won't be as quick as I say, so I'll talk about them. Um, but when we're reading the book, if you guys remember, some of the people who are going down the African coast, they say they put up a marker. In Portuguese, it's a pedral. And this marker is they sometimes will say a marker with a cross. And it's one of these things. This is a replica of it. This isn't an actual. And you can find an actual marker in a maritime museum in Lisbon, but it's these big stone statue tower marker things that they put into the ground and have it holding up. And so this is the Portuguese flag with a cross on top of it. And this is what they would put along the coast. And this is how they would claim Portugal with these big stone pillars that they would put into the ground. So when you read that, that they would put up these pedrals or these markers, that's what it's talking about. I think in the next few chapters, we'll learn about someone who goes pretty far up a river. His last name is Cao, Pedro Cao, I think. And so they have these small ships that they're navigating up a river, and they carry these big stone pillars with them. So that as soon as they get to the end of it, if they find Prester John, great. If not, then they're going to leave a marker there to claim that land for Portugal. And so they would put these things in and they would etch into the stone pillar who the captain of the ship was, the navigator, and the people who were there when they placed the pillar into the ground. And that's so when you're reading that, that's what you can picture in your mind as being the marker that they're putting in the ground. Next, has anyone ever been to Lisbon besides Brock? And if you have you seen this monument? All right. So brand new for everybody. Let me introduce to everyone except for Brock, one of my favorite monuments that I've seen maybe ever, because I just think it's super cool. And that's one of the reasons why I'm teaching this class, because I started learning this topic and I love it. It's so interesting. So if you look at this, it doesn't look that big of a monument, but if you look closely, you can see these people, right? Just to sort of give it a little bit of context to the height of this thing. Gigantic monument that's at this spot in Lisbon next to the waterfront. This area is where, so this area used to be all river. If you go back to these trees, that's sort of where the coastline would have been. It's part of a river, but the river really opens up out into the Atlantic Ocean. So the bay maybe is probably a proper term. But if you go back to these trees here, that is where these people, Bartolomeu Diaz, Fernando Cao, I think I just called him Pedro. I'll have to figure out his name. But all these people that we're reading about, when they leave on their boats, this is where they're leaving from. Like this spot back behind this monument is where they're coming. The king is coming down, saying a prayer for them, like shaking their hands, and then off they go onto their boat and they sail away off to do advanced Christianity and find really cool things for Portugal. But on this monument, you have all of these people that are carved in. So this person here on the front is Henry the Navigator, and he's holding a caravel, which was the original ship that allowed them to go out and do things. We'll find out that it was replaced by a carrack that could go further, longer, carry more things. And you have King Afonso, so his nephew, who is currently the king that we're reading about in the last few chapters, who started the slave trade, found gold and started mining gold and bringing it back to Portugal, bringing those riches. You have Vasco da Gama, who we'll learn more about in the future. Afonso Baldeia, I believe he was the navigator that found the Azores. And if it wasn't the Azores, it was Madeira. There's a guy on the other side who was the navigator that found the other one. I can't remember exactly. But if you go down here, Diogo Cao, he's the one, I didn't even get his name right. I think I called him Pedro and oh, I was wrong. My bad. Diogo Cao we'll read about this week. Bartolomeo Diaz, we'll read about this week. And here they are. They have this marker that is one of the things that they were doing. So Diogo Cao is the one that went up the river and left a marker. Bartolomeo Diaz is the one who left a marker at the southern end of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. And then you have all sorts of these other names. So when we go through this class, we will be talking about almost every single one of these people. And then if you're ever in Lisbon, I would highly recommend you go and check out the spot. Super cool. And then that's one side. And then on the other side, we have Henry the Navigator again, Ferdinand the Saint. And I can't remember, in this week's chapter, did we get to Ferdinand, the brother that was left behind in Ceuta? Or is that the next? Okay. Might be the next chapter. If it's not, spoiler alert. So they take over Ceuta, right? Oh, Braden, go ahead.
You didn't talk about him in like any of the lessons, but he was in one of the videos.
Okay. Okay. And so maybe he'll actually be in the early on in chapter 5 when we get into it. And I apologize if that's true. But Ferdinand, so they take over Ceuta, one of these key shipping ports in Morocco. As soon as they take it over, they just start rerouting all of the ships and go to a different city. So it doesn't affect commerce that much, as much as the Portuguese wanted, and it ends up costing them a lot more money to keep the city than it was to just take it. So these brothers, the illustrious age, they go down, they take over the city, they get knighted, and they have this glory now behind them of this war experience, which is great for them to move forward into the future. They sort of set their Portugal's mark as being a formidable opponent of Islam. And so then they keep the city and it becomes too expensive for them to hold, and they start to lose the city. And they say, we're going to give you our brother if you let us leave Ceuta safely and go back home. You can have the city, and here you can keep our brother. And then with the expectation that someday they would come and they would trade for him. This is Ferdinand the Saint. He's left in a Moroccan prison, never makes it home. And so if you haven't gotten to that part, we'll talk about it next week. Because I can't imagine leaving my little brother behind with no intention of going back to get him. I think that's one interesting thing in this story of as the youngest brother is maybe expendable or not. I'm the third, so I don't have to worry about that. I am the same as Henry the Navigator, I guess, in my family. This Pero do Alenquer is the other one, found the Azores or Madeira. I'm not sure which one. I can't remember them. And Gilles Ienish is the one that went past Cape Bojador that we learned about. And we go down these things. In a couple of weeks, we'll talk about Jacome of Mallorca, and we will talk about Pero Escobar, and let's see, Gomes Ienish, I think. So a couple of these are mathematicians and map makers. So the Portuguese changed the way that maps were made. We'll talk about this. I won't go too much into it right now, but maps were more artistic. These guys made it more mathematical. So the lines were more correct. As you're following different routes and different things, their maps became more trustworthy because of the mathematical aspect of it instead of what they were doing before. And then down here, Philippa of Lancaster, the mother of all these young men, not all of these, the mother of Henry the Navigator, Ferdinand the Saint, and Peter, Duke of Coimbra, was the second born son. So he was Henry the Navigator's older brother. He becomes pretty important in Portugal, but never becomes the actual king. He's the regent king when Afonso was really young. He's sort of running the kingdom until Afonso becomes of age. But yeah, we'll go through all of these people little by little over the next few weeks. And this monument is, to me, it's super cool. It's gigantic. The work that they put into it and the detail is pretty incredible, especially up front in person. So on to a few of my favorite things. What did you guys like this week in the reading? What stood out to you? What did you feel? What maybe inspired you? What was your favorite part? Yeah, Christopher, go ahead.
So, on the first chapter, I was reading about like the history of like the Jews and all that. And uh it kept on like talking about Mecca. And I'm like, what in the world is Mecca? So I searched it up and it's like so cool how it's like this meeting place for all the Muslims to come together and pray, and it has like this huge buildings and it's like so crazy, but I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, really, it's super cool. And such, I mean, they called that the center of the earth. And I think it still could be just because of the magnitude and the importance of all the things. It's an area of the world that's sacred for three religions. Christianity, because this is where Christ lived and lived and worked and did miracles, and it's also an area for the Jews where, I mean, that it's such an important part for them. And then as you mentioned, for Islam, I mean, it's a place of pilgrimage for all kinds of people. Three of the world's biggest religions consider that a holy place, and as a backdrop for that, that's part of why these Christians, the Portuguese and the Spanish, want to get Jerusalem back because it is now Mecca for Islam, and they want it back so that they can instead be the ones who are going on pilgrimages to this area to worship and pray where Christ walked. Um, yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. And good job putting the book down and going and feeding that curiosity. That's really cool. Good job. All right. Don Osmond. That's not Don. Truman, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm at my dad's office.
Cool.
I got other things that's happening and my mom's gone. So I'm at my dad's office right now.
Cool.
So, um, what I thought was interesting, um, was the ships, in the video. Um, like the ships that they made, like how they were lightweight so that like the bottom would, and they also made it so that the bottom wouldn't be so deep so that they can go into coral into like reefs and shallow waters. And then like they made like this triangular sail to sail against the wind, which I thought that was also really interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I thought
Super cool.
that new ship idea was really amazing. And it was
Yeah.
probably important for the the them creating that whole trade thing. So
Absolutely. Yeah, and those are exactly the things that we're going to talk more about in 2 weeks. I'm glad that you thought it was cool. I think that you'll really enjoy what we talk about in 2 weeks. And we'll talk about the physics, the Satine cells. So there's this lightweight triangular cell, and how is it that you can have a sail that when you're going into the wind, even though you're going right into the wind, it can still push your boat forward. Like, how does that even work? We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks, but super awesome advancements that they made so that they could make all of these things happen. Um, yeah, I think that that's cool. In fact, I like it so much. I created a company so as you know, like with this class, I have an optional tour to Portugal and Spain. My World War II class, I have an optional trip for Berlin. Last year we went to Paris. In the future years, I'm going to be teaching a class on Roman history, so we'll go take an optional trip to Rome. And I created a company in order to do that, and my company name is Carrick International. So the boat that the next step from a caravel to a carrack, which is the boat that they use to circumnavigate the world, to explore all these places, to take cultures. And anyway, I've been so impressed with the technology and the building that I named a company after it. So I agree with you, Truman. I think it's pretty cool stuff. And I like innovation and things like that too. I mean, that's my other job. It's all innovation, doing patent stuff. Excellent. Good comment. All right, what else? What else stood out to you guys? What do you think was cool or what wasn't cool? What made you mad, maybe? Anything?
The slave trade.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
I thought it was interesting that like the people in Portugal, like a lot of them were sad and cried, like when they saw the slaves being brought in.
Yeah. How do you think that would feel? I mean, it wasn't something that was entirely new, right? When people would take over a country or you'd win a battle, I guess at that time it was normal to bring back some of the people as slaves. But what made this a little different?
It was like just taking random people from villages and like women and children.
Yeah. I don't know. That didn't sit well with me either. And I guess it made me feel maybe comfort. I don't know if the comfort's the right word, but when I read that the people were sad, that they were shocked with the way they were being treated and didn't like that they were being treated sort of like these animals, right? It made me
Mhm.
feel better in a way that they had a conscience about it, that they didn't like what the king was doing. Because I mean, it was totally unnecessary, right? I get when you're like going to war with people and you're battling, and then when you win the battle, then to the victor goes the spoils, I guess. But when you're just like invading villages, just randomly just showing up and hauling people away, I didn't like that. I didn't think that was right. So I agree with you. Thank you for that comment. Braden, go ahead.
Yeah, so uh I thought it was when I was reading about it, all of it, when I was reading about the Crusades, I thought, I was like, oh, I've heard of these. These is like when they all just kind of attack everything. And when I was actually reading through it, uh I thought, that their cause and what they were trying to fight for was actually pretty good. I think if they didn't get distracted and just attack everything and attack like crazily, because they went a bit over the top, but if they didn't do that, if they just did what they actually set out to do and just conquer back the places, it would have been the Crusades probably would have been uh remembered in a very different light. Because I feel like nowadays when you hear the Crusades, you're like, oh yeah, it's the when the Europeans came and wreaked a whole bunch of destruction on everything. Uh, I think it uh they didn't just wreak destruction on everything, including their own cities. If they just and if they were like it was more of a military thing than just kill everybody you can, then it would have been more of a good thing. Like uh when they like the Christians came and reclaimed the land that was unjustly taken from them, kind of thing, instead of they came and just destroyed everything they could. So I just found that interesting.
Yeah, I think that part's interesting too, and I think it's a pretty tricky balance between a lot of different things. Because and this won't be the first time we talk about this topic. It's going to come up often because it feels strange to me that the Pope, the leader of their church, would send a letter, and this will happen a couple of times, saying, go and take Christianity to this part of the world by whatever means necessary, right? So they'll take a few missionaries, but they get into these villages and they say, you want to be Christian? And he said, you want to, right? Or like while they're holding a sword, like you're going to convert, right? And so it just feels kind of strange that the leader of the church is sort of saying, if you take this to people, baptize them, teach them, but if they don't follow along, then it's okay to kill them. And that won't be used against you in the judgment. Like they get this absolution from things. When Alphonse de Albuquerque, who comes after Vasco da Gama leaves to go over, and he becomes the governor of India, at least the Portuguese portions of it. He's given, I think it's like 30 months that whatever you do for the next 30 months is not a sin, as long as you're doing it for Christ. And I thought that's strange because the guy goes and he does some things that are really terrible. And he had this like idea that I'm doing this for the church, and so it's not a sin. And so it's sort of this weird, like, I don't know. I don't like the that Christ is used as a reason for doing some of this stuff, like the slave trade, like these other things, because I don't think that my view of him would not support those things. Um, so it'll be sort of this like topic that we'll have to dance around, and we'll talk about it a number of times of why is this the case, and we'll touch on it some more. But thanks for bringing that up, Braden. I think it's interesting too. I don't think I fall on the same line as the Portuguese did on a lot of this stuff, as far as what they were doing in the name of Christ. I didn't agree with a lot of it because I don't think Christ would support it, at least in my opinion. So we'll talk about that also throughout the course. Good job. All right, Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that like I feel like the Portuguese people would just like see the slaves walking by and they're like, wait, that's my country taking people. It's just like nothing to be proud of, you know?
Yeah,
It's like just not great, really.
yeah, I agree, and I think they sort of lost their way. I think that they became more driven by money instead of really their initial goals. And I think that's one interesting part here. I'm going back up to this king part under Afonso. They're really about finding gold, bringing slaves back, selling the slaves so that they could get more money into the country. And so then when John II comes into power, the perfect prince, they call him, he has more discipline, more vision, and I think starts trying to do things perhaps what more in line with what I would consider as the right way. And I think the people too. I mean, he gained the reputation of being the perfect prince because the people really liked him. I think going from someone from Afonso who's doing those things and um, that they don't maybe like or aren't comfortable with to someone who is trying to do things the right way. So the Portuguese were one of the first countries to ever do slave trade. They're also one of the first countries to ban it and outlaw it and get rid of it. Um, so they'd finished doing it a lot sooner than other countries. Also, according to my research, what did you guys learn? As you put the book down, what were some of the things that you found interesting beyond the stories that we were reading? I'll say just to add this first one here, I think it was from Addie. According to her research, the Moors were a mixture of North African Berbers and the Arabs. The Moors ruled Spain for 800 years. Portugal also. They have so many ruins everywhere that are left from the Moors that were claimed by the Christians, and then the Christians either like cleansed it and blessed it and turned their mosques into cathedrals, or they tore them down, or they just built a cathedral over it. But they had so many things. They introduced, excuse me, scientific techniques. They had ideas. They had a lot of different things that they were doing to um, advance technology and innovation. But they played a huge role in the Mediterranean Sea. They almost controlled the whole coast of the Mediterranean Sea all the way around it for a period of time. And it looked like, and this was in the chapter that we skipped, but it looked like Islam was going to control the whole Mediterranean Sea and then start pushing the Christians out, moving further north and taking over everything. And so it's interesting that Christianity started in Jerusalem and then moved to Europe because it started getting pushed out from Islam. And so Christianity is viewed now as a European religion, at least at this time period. The Christians lived in Europe, and it was because they were pushed out of Jerusalem and out of this region of the world. They took a lot of things: oranges, lemons, peaches, apricots, figs. I have wild fig trees that are just growing around the corner. They're just all over the place now. And the oranges here are incredible. They brought a lot of that. I thought that was really interesting too. How much of an influence they still have, the Moorish people from North Africa and Arabia. The influence they still have on the Portuguese culture is pretty incredible today. Anything else before we close? Sorry, I did most of the talking today. Next week, I will not do as much. We'll talk more about the books, chapters 5 and 6. The supplemental content will be Bartolomeo Dias, Peru del Cavilla, and a few other things that will help us get ready for Vasco da Gama to come up and take his place in history. So that's it for this week. Thanks for your discussions. Thanks for posting the stuff online that you did and advancing the discussions there. Keep up the good work. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll post the homework later today so that you know exactly what we'll be doing for the next week. And yeah, I'm here for you if you have any questions. I'll stay after class. Also, send me a message online or come to the office hours on Wednesday. It's been great. Have a great rest of your week, you guys. We'll see you next week.